hours. The Commissioner of Police in the regulations is permitted to adjust the curfew hours. So the regulations published last night revoked the earlier regulation, which was number 146. 142. They are now replaced by the ones last night as 176. And once 176, the new regulations were published, we had to issue a curfew order change. The Commissioner of Police did that. The Cabinet, of course, had that in operation, and we published by legal notice 177. We amended the curfew hours in the regulations. We moved it from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. for regular movement essential service hours, and from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m., which is limited movement hours with permission of the Commissioner of Police as essential services. We moved those times from 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. and we moved it from 10 a.m. to 5 a.m. So the laws are in operation as follows. Public health regulations, mask wearing, testing, quarantining, public service limitations. That's law number one. Law number two, the state of emergency regulations published last night. Those laws are now in effect. And law number three, the curfew hours issued under the Commissioner of Police by his hand today, as was always going to be happening, because we needed to revoke the earlier regs, create the new regs, and then change the time frames, and they had to follow in that order. The hours of operation for tomorrow and for Thursday, 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. During those hours, pharmacies can operate, churches can operate for weddings, funerals, etc., and other religious organizations. Live streaming from those entities can happen, and all of the permitted people, essential services set out in detail in regulation 4 subsection 5 are permitted to work. Two things have happened since then. Administratively, the Commissioner of Police has issued a press release. The Commissioner of Police has confirmed that the curfew passes that have been issued under his hand will be valid for the adjusted hours on Monday and Thursday. So there's no need for new curfew passes. Number two, the Commissioner of Police has reminded that we are permitted to use the hotline established for the purposes. That is the hotline set up by the Commissioner of Police, which is now in the public domain. Says call the hotline and explain why you need to be where you are going and outside after 10 a.m. tomorrow. If you need to leave your home and you're not set out in the regulations described in Regulation 4, subsection 5, you call the hotline. The Ministry of Health has issued a press release as well, which is in circulation, which says the vaccinations which were scheduled for tomorrow and for Thursday will be rescheduled, that all of the regional health authorities are in the process of treating with that. Many entities have reached out and we're already addressing their concerns. I wish to thank the President of the Law Association, Senior Counsel, Mrs. Sophia Choate, for her reach out and for carrying a few questions across, which we discussed. So the conversation is a continuing one. The Commissioner of Police is the frontline authority treating with the permissions to be outside. I want to remind that in his press release, he's dealt with people that have to move to the airport, essential workers that have to move in their normal daytime positions. We've had inquiries about nurses who are required to attend to geriatric care institutions or to people who are under management. All of those circumstances are contemplated. We need to call the hotline. And the reason that we do this, and I wish to state that having had the feedback for the operation of the hotline, it is a very useful thing. The reason for doing this is so that you don't find yourself at the side of the road having to explain for a very long time to the policeman or to the member of the Trinidad and Tobago Defence Force or the reserves why you are breaking the curfew hours without reasonable cause. So call the hotline, get those discussions in order. The regulations provide for the Minister of Health to also consider certain aspects of the regulations, and I know that the Ministry of Health is receiving those clarifications as they come in case by case. So in the round and in summary now, I'll say to the population, please be aware the regulations have changed. Those regulations were issued last night as a new state of emergency regulation. Those regulations are in effect. That is Regulation 176 as it's published, the Emergency Powers Number 2 Regulation 2021. They work alongside the public health regulations. They work alongside the laws of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, both written and unwritten. They work alongside the adjustment of the curfew hours, which was an order produced under the hand of the Commission of Police under the State of Emergency Regulations, in circulation as legal notice number 177 of 2021. The vaccinations that are scheduled for Monday and for Thursday are being rescheduled by the Minister of Health and the regional health authorities. The hotline that has been established and has been in operation continues to be the port of call. Curfew passes that were issued by the Commission of Police in their several thousands are valid for the period. Persons that have the status of being essential workers and having shift changes, etc., are invited to call the hotline so that there is notice to the forces that are on the roads, members of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, members of the Defence Force. They will be tracking and monitoring the structures. Now, very simply put to Trinidad and Tobago, the numbers are what we are looking at. The mission is not so much only how thick or how detailed the laws are. It isn't to address the criticisms of many people that come out immediately to criticize without waiting for the products or understanding that there is timing to be had. I noted some complaints or observations coming from lawyers overnight and this morning saying the government fell short. No, we did not fall short. You just needed to wait for the curfew hours publications to come clear, and obviously for the press conference to be held, knowing fully well that the curfew applies tomorrow and on Thursday in a different form. The mission at hand really is to reduce the numbers. Trinidad and Tobago is well aware that there's a time when telling people you don't have to go to school or you don't have to go to work was sometimes an enjoyable experience for some. We are very mindful as a country that these are very difficult times. The government is aware of the need to balance the economic survival of our citizens against the saving of lives by ensuring that the COVID pandemic doesn't overtake our healthcare system. All of the members of Parliament are out in their numbers, all of the NGOs, all of the institutions that have been lending a hand. We are very mindful of the hard task that is there. What we're urging the population to do is to please, let's help to attack the spread of the virus by staying home for the limited hours that we are permitted to move on the public holidays. Let's do our best to even avoid having to go out if that's possible. The emergencies and exigencies can be taken care of by the hotline and approaches to the Ministry of Health. But this is really an occasion where every person who has the air of anyone else ought to simply encourage the position. Permit me to, before getting to questions, to say, as I don't often get this opportunity, I'd just like to say on behalf of every one of us, thank you to all of the people of Trinidad and Tobago who have been serving everyone else, to supermarket workers, to sanitation workers, to nurses and doctors and orderlies, to the staff at the Registrar General, to the functionaries that record deaths and births, to everybody outside there, to members of the media. Thank you. Please, the Prime Minister has given us an horizon of good news as we fight to obtain more vaccines. The Prime Minister has explained that approach yesterday, and there'll be more to be said on that area. For now, let's just do our part and push as hard as we can. May I accept your queries or questions so that any clarification that is needed can be provided, and I look forward to your attention. Thank you so much, Nazir.
Thank you very much, Attorney General. We now move into our question and answer segment. Media representatives are kindly asked to state your name and your media house before putting your question to the Attorney General. Responses will be given to 2 questions per media house in first instance, and if time permits, we will accommodate additional questions for each media. We begin with Rashad Karim, Guardian Media Limited.
Good morning, everyone. Rashad Khan from Guardian Media here. Attorney General, I just have one question for you this morning. I believe Labor Day is the next public holiday that will be falling within this state of emergency period. So is it that you all are going to monitor how well this extended curfew works for these upcoming public holidays, and a similar thing may be seen for that public holiday or even extended into weekends or anything like that?
The answer is quite simply yes. The government is mandated to be guided by the data. Dr. Faris was very careful yesterday to remind that the 2-week cycle of observation, the epidemiological cycle as they call it, ends today. And therefore, the tallying of the numbers, how the system has managed to adjust to the stay-home measures, all of that feeds into what recommendations come next. And quite simply, in answer to your question, yes, everything is under observation. The Cabinet works literally 24 hours a day. I want to thank the Office of the President, Her Excellency the President, for being with us until close to midnight last night and ensuring that the regulations were issued as they needed to be. Thank you very much to Her Excellency the President and to the staff of the President's Office and the Cabinet Secretary.
Right, next up we have Priya Bihari of APZ News.
Hi, good afternoon. Priya Bihari, azpnews.com. Mr. H, I just have some queries about healthcare workers who may have shifts and who usually take a taxi to go to work. What is the issue? How do they get to work? I mean, if many of them have to call the hotline, I think, it'll be overwhelmed. That is my first issue. And I think my second question is just an extension of Rashad's. How effective do you think that these new curfew hours given in these 2 public holidays, how effective do you think they will be? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Priya. The Commissioner of Police has put out a press release. I'll read it for you in part in answer to your question. Thank you for the opportunity to amplify what the Commissioner of Police has said. I read from the press release. The Commissioner recognizes that there will be those essential workers going to or returning from shift duty without curfew permits. In those circumstances, the employee simply needs to produce the company identification card and explain to the officer where he or she is going to or coming from. Employers are also encouraged to provide letters, if possible, to these employees. These letters will be acceptable even if electronic. The Commissioner went on further to indicate that the hotline was available. So these things have been clearly contemplated. The management of this law is under the hand of the Commissioner of Police, aided by the Trinidad and Tobago Defence Force and the Special Reserves that have been called out. In amplification of your question on the back of Rashad's question, quite simply, remember this is the first time we're dealing in Trinidad and Tobago with a state of emergency for a pandemic purpose. The data and the coincidence of data management with remedy, meaning new regulations based upon facts, that is something that is a constant moving target that we constantly pay attention to. The Honorable Prime Minister consults with a wide team. I noticed a few commentators, there's a writer in one of the papers today, sort of alleging that the Prime Minister has not taken advice on these measures. Well, I'd just like to disabuse the writer in the newspaper. There is no such event. The Prime Minister consults as the head of the cabinet, not only with the Chief Medical Officer and the technical experts, but also in the wider CARICOM, the WHO, the PAHO arrangements, with the Commissioner of Police, with the data that comes from the Defence Force, the statistical information that comes constantly. The Minister of Health, the Minister of National Security, the Minister of Energy, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Minister of Social Development, all entities with the Attorney General's office obviously underwriting all of the work. There is a constant coordination of information. As soon as we receive a request for an adjustment, it is considered by all of the parties. The cabinet sits as it sat last night. The work product is perfected. We then get into delivering the work product, and permit me the opportunity to explain that. It's not just that the cabinet writes a piece of paper from the Attorney General and says that that's the law. After that law is done, the regulations are issued by Her Excellency the President. Cabinet approves. It goes to government printer for proofreading, every single word, every single line. The office of the President sits every single word, every single line. They then confirm whether they have queries or not. They're asked and answered. Adjustments are made if necessary or not. The President then considers and then issues regulations, then goes to the government printer, then gets published, then gets disseminated. Then the Commissioner of Police curfew orders gets done. So it is not as easy a thing as saying, well, yeah, we're having a curfew, and that's the hour. The process of the law has to be applied, and it has to be very carefully put forward. So to the national psyche that is anxious to have an instantaneous product, it's not as simple as a Twitter post or an observation. There are many moving parts to this, and we have to take our time to get it right.
Thank you, Mr. Bihari. Now we'll go on to Rishi Harinanan of Rhythms Communications Network.
Hi, good day, AG. Just a couple of questions I have. Rishi Harinanan from Rhythms Communications Network. I heard you mention something about the Law Association, but I didn't hear it properly because the audio was breaking up a bit. But what sort of consultation, if any, is had with the Law Association when it comes to these regulations? Because when we spoke with Sophia Choate, Senior Counsel, she said that the Law Association hasn't really been consulted with the articulation of these regulations. And the other thing is, when the Prime Minister makes these announcements on Saturdays, is it possible then that you be there and have the regulations in place? Because I know that people have been saying, let's just have one press conference with everybody so that people wouldn't be left in the dark after having to wait for the regulations to come out and then have the questions to answer. And somebody had asked if gas stations would be allowed to be open tomorrow, if you could just address that.
Sure. Thank you for those three questions, or one observation and clarification. So let's work the moving parts out. The Attorney General's job is to deliver the laws for the consideration of the Cabinet, and then to have them implemented via Cabinet decision. That may or may not involve a parliamentary process. So in this case here, we're not in a parliamentary process, we're dealing with a regulatory process. The Prime Minister was very careful to inform that we make these decisions based upon data. Dr. Parasram and indeed Dr. Hines were also careful to say that we are not, until today, yesterday they said we had not completed the cycle, the epidemiological cycle. In other words, then all of the data was not in. So the Prime Minister's press conference on this Saturday is a heads up. Saturday he spoke, indicating that the public holiday on Monday and the public holiday on Thursday would be adjusted. Restaurants would be adjusted. Hardwares would be adjusted. With today, Sunday, having published these things at midnight already, we still have the room to do the clarification because we anticipated that there would be need for clarification. What goes on, the reason why I am not physically at that conference is that I am drafting whilst the Prime Minister is speaking and doing the consultation aspects, making sure we get all of the ironed out details clear, because that's my job. So I don't need to be at the conference for several hours because I have a job to do and I'm busy doing that job with my team, etc. We sometimes bounce issues off of the Law Association, and sometimes, of course, we factor certain things that come. But I want to remind you that as Attorney General, I've been managing the litigation in relation to the public health regulations. We have been swamped with litigation, largely brought on by attorneys at law who are advocates and proponents for the United National Congress, the opposition. So we've had hundreds of pieces of litigation on the regulations, and therefore we've tested them in court. The Attorney General's office has been victorious in all of the matters. We've spent a massive amount of time and a lot of expertise in getting those things right. We've had everything challenged, from the saved law to the mechanisms to the structures. This is a democracy. As an Attorney General, I cannot complain with anybody's access to the courts for clarifications. What I can tell you is that out of that, the law is very clear. We have been victorious every time. I wish my opponents were not in that mode, but they are constitutionally entitled to be there. The Law Association is not an entity that we consult prior to the issuance of regulations. We're fairly aware of what their views are, and the door is wide open for their communications. I have a world of regard for my colleagues at the Law Association. Mrs. Choate, Senior Counsel, has been also a legislator. As I told her today, I value her opinion with utmost sincerity. So in the round, therefore, the AG is busy working whilst the rest of the team does their part of it. The Prime Minister gives the heads up. We are well within time of positions. Because the data is given on the Saturday and the cycle usually finishes on the Sunday and the mechanisms have to fold, we're not able to all be there with pre-packaged regulations. Let me just give you an insight. A year and a half ago, we had three options to manage the pandemic. We had the Disaster Measures Act, we had the state of emergency, and we had the public health regulations. We drafted each one of those. I drafted each one of those alternatives, and then we selected. So when the Honorable Prime Minister and team sits and discusses with the nation on a Saturday what goes on, it's usually that we have about 10 work items behind us, from which we have a menu effectively to choose which way we're going to go. Thanks for that opportunity to clarify that.
Thank you, Rishi. Now we'll move on to Sean Douglas of the Newsday.
So Sean, we're not hearing you if you're chiming in. Your microphone shows as muted.
Yes, Sean, just unmute your mic, please.
If not, Naz, could I perhaps ask that we go on to someone else and we can come back to Sean?
Yes, we can move on.
Sean.
Okay, right. Sorry, I had a little problem there. Okay, my concern is the traveling of the essential workers to and fro. It was touched upon a bit by Pryor earlier, but both Her Excellency and the Commissioner of Police have set down the time of 5:01 to 10:01 for the operation of these essential services, including media. But my problem really is whether workers at the essential services are going to be caught out by section sorry, I lost a section, but one of there's a overarching general section that well, I was just basically wondering if the actual legislation itself, these fresh laws, needed to make some allowance for the workers who are going to be outside of the 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. schedule. I think that's in a nutshell.
Thank you, Sean, for that opportunity. I'll point you to Regulation 4.5. Regulation 4.5 still prevails. So when the curfew applies, that's at 10 a.m. tomorrow, Regulation 4.5 sets out everybody that can move and the circumstances that they can. 4.1 indicated that you needed the authorization of the Commissioner of Police. The Commissioner of Police has said, come and ask for a curfew pass or use the hotline. He has said that the Commissioner of Police will have those aspects into gear. In Regulation 4.5, which is still very clear and set out. I refer you to page 17 of the regulations as published onward, and you will see that Regulation 4.5 says all of the workers who are permitted to be there. The Commissioner of Police has, in his press conference, said precisely that he is aware that there will be some people that are in the normal daytime usually permitted under Regulation 3 to move around, or that there would be shift changes going on, and he has indicated exactly how he will manage those things with clear terms. The question came about, two more questions have come in whilst we were speaking. One, again, a question on the vaccination appointments being rescheduled. Just to remind, the Ministry of Health has informed that the RHAs are in the process of rescheduling all of those appointments which were originally carded for tomorrow, Monday, and for Thursday, being the public holidays. And with respect to the gas stations opening, I refer you to the regulations again, which permit the gas stations to be open all day today until 9 p.m. tomorrow morning from 5 a.m. to 10, and that the emergency structures are clear and set out in the regulations. What I would just simply ask people to do is to just let's stay home if we can. I don't think we really need to find every exception in the book as to why we absolutely, all of us, have to move tomorrow on a public holiday and on Thursday. The emergencies are very understandable. I want to refer to a question that came to me from Member of Parliament Rudy Indarsing. Thank you for your question. He asked about people that have dialysis treatment and attendances at the hospital. Again, persons who have emergency management and critical care at the hospitals are permitted in those normal circumstances. Please use the hotline to address your concerns with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and let's try to coordinate that way. I've received a question from a colleague of mine who has said, in trying to translate the question, how are essential workers getting to work if they travel? Is public transport working? I think that is what one of the journalists is trying to get to. If that's it, the Commissioner of Police has said he understands and has arrangements in place for persons who need to move, use the hotline, and that the public transportation aspects will be coordinated. So please take your queries to the Commissioner of Police's hotline.
All right, we move to follow-up questions now with Rishi first.
Hi, AG, just a couple of questions that were asked of me by my colleagues as well. The regulations speak specifically to prepared meals to restaurants. Can you clarify whether frozen meals prepared by local food manufacturers are permissible at this time?
So, Rishi, thank you. Permit me to be straight. You know the expression smart manism and smart womanism? We're very ingenious in our country. We know clearly we wanted restaurants to close, not because we dislike restaurants, not because we want to see people on the poverty line. These are hard things for people that have mortgages to pay, that have families to feed. The problem that we're having is with the circulation of people going to the kitchen, producing the work product, etc. So what we did was to arrange a very targeted adjustment, because we saw, I don't mean to single them out, I love their food product. We have Royal Castle. We have some of my favorite roti shops selling in pharmacies and in groceries, etc. So the grocers know that the restaurants are closed, and the grocers are selling the food product from the closed restaurant. So we all know what's going on. Nothing wrong with that. The regulations permitted the restaurants to close, and they were therefore taking the second step by going somewhere else to do it. So we adjusted the regulations. If you look to regulation 312, and we go down to the structures of what is permitted inside of there, let me pull it up so I get the wording for you clearly. So regulation 3 deals with what's permitted and what's not. We dealt with the hardwares in an adjustment to say that they should not be open. We dealt with that in sub-regulation. That's 3, sub-regulation 7, unless prescribed by the minister. We then went down through 9, and 10 is where we say what could normally happen in the working movement hours. That's sub-regulation 310. And then we got to sub-regulation 311. And here's what it says. Restaurants shall remain closed and shall not supply or distribute prepared meals. We said prepared meals for sale to supermarkets, groceries, markets, greengrocers, bakeries, poultry depots, retail membership discount stores, wholesale stores for the provision of food, medicine, or other necessities of life, pharmacies, convenient marts, etc. The frozen manufacturers that are in existence, that are not operating restaurants that have been closed pursuant to the regulations, they have pre-existing businesses. Those entities are asked very kindly to please contact the Ministry of Health, to please contact the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and to have the specific circumstance of your operation considered, lest you fall afoul. You see, because the concept of restaurant is such a wide concept, it is prudent for people to obtain the specific permission of the Commission of Police, and that hotline will help to assist on what is permitted and what is not permitted. It is clear, and I don't mean to single out this name, that I'll use it in a generic, that a popular, wonderful Trinidadian fast food chicken and chips fried outlet should not be selling via a grocery, a pharmacy, etc. Or that a popular roti shop should not be selling their products secondhand to groceries and pharmacies, etc. Why? Because the staff that comes out to cook for these restaurants and prepare the food will be in circulation. The more we comply with this, is the faster we can take this yoke off of our necks and our backs and get back into normalcy. We want to allow the health officials to see the data to climb down, to move in the right direction as the vaccine supply continues to improve, as the Honorable Prime Minister has given a heads up on.
Right. Follow-up question now from Prior.
Hi, good afternoon again. AG, I know the whole issue here is to reduce the number of people out and about. So therefore, would you give any consideration to reduce the number of essential workers, or is it that you're focusing maybe on restricting the time people are out? I'm just trying to find out the thinking behind these new regulations and the restrictions.
Thank you so much, Prior. First of all, it's all driven by the expert advice that we get. The Prime Minister touched upon something that was very important. The Prime Minister indicated that whilst on the one hand it sounds great for us to reduce hours, on the other hand, the more you reduce hours is the more you bottleneck people. So let's say we reduced hours tremendously and we said your curfew is between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. or 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. All of the people who would have to rush to go to the supermarket, rush to go to the pharmacy, are going to turn up in greater numbers at that location in a shorter period of time, and therefore the virus gets to feed in a productive environment. So I want you to bear in mind that we're not dealing with an enemy at the gate. We're not dealing with a revolution of a defined membership of people who are oppressing the state and causing civil unrest in a particular area or generally. What we're dealing with, the enemy that we're dealing with, is the congregation of people, full stop. So on the one hand, we have to manage what the bottlenecking phenomenon will look like, and on the other hand, we have to balance it with what we are as a people. The Commissioner of Police has told us that in 72 hours he received 360,000 requests for curfew passes. This is a population of 1.3 million people, nearly 1.4. Take off all the school children under 17 that can't drive. Take off the elderly above 65 that are not in work for particular reasons because they are past retirement age. that means nearly the entire working population of Trinidad and Tobago asked for a curfew pass. So that's the culture of Trinidad and Tobago. The culture is, you know, we understand, we know we need to reduce numbers, cut it over there, but don't cut it over here. And it's not because people are being selfish, it's because people are fighting for their lives in terms of their livelihood. So we understand that. It's not easy for the Honorable Prime Minister to have to be the head of a government, I would imagine, respectfully, to have to make tough choices and to tell certain people no and certain people yes. What we're asking the population to be mindful of is that the enemy is congregation, mixing, letting your guard down, having a COVID positive person in your house, 5 people in the home, maybe more, 1 person is ill, everybody else feels good, and they may be asymptomatic and move around and infect more people. So we're trying to reduce the congregation factor. So I'll end by saying on that particular point, we just need to hold on a little bit stronger. The vaccines are on the horizon. The Prime Minister alluded to that yesterday. We are at every manufacturer's door. I do the transaction work for the Ministry of Finance. As a matter of fact, all bonds, all borrowings, all financial arrangements. I vet all of the agreements that we have to execute with Trinidad and Tobago and any supplier. What I can tell you is money is not an issue. What I can tell you is knocking on the doors of suppliers is not an issue. What the suppliers say is, we are talking to you, Trinidad and Tobago. When we have the supply, we'll give it to you. Can you please make a down payment and sign my agreement and indemnify me against losses? And what we've said to the private sector is, because most of the private sector comes up and says, well, look, if you appoint us as an agent, we will get the supply for you. Well, we're not in the concept of agency because we're talking directly to the principal. And we have, the Prime Minister has made it clear that the private sector has a role to be played. There are rules and regulations inside of there, like who has the indemnity, how are we organizing the approvals, etc. This is a game where everybody has a role to play. But just for one moment, please remember that it is not just the Honorable Prime Minister or any one of his ministers speaking. It is the government of Trinidad and Tobago with all of its expertise working around the clock at all of the doors. So thank you for that very generous opportunity to explain a few issues more than the one that was just asked.
Next up, we have follow-up questions from Rashad Khan.
Thank you very much for getting the surname correct this time. Okay, so AHE, this is just something that I've been seeing circulating on social media, and I would like to get your take on it and your response, right? A number of people I've seen questioning why this wasn't done back in Easter and could have probably prevented all this spread that we are seeing now. Just your response.
Sure, well, that is premised upon the uptick being confined to Easter alone. But statistically and factually, that's not the only contributor. So we have been at pains as a country to say, observe the 3 W's. Some of us are guilty of COVID fatigue. We let our guard down every now and then. There's an aspect of humanity. I know that all too well. But the point is, it is not true on that premise to say that, well, Easter caused the rise. We had a number of contributing factors. Our general behavior, COVID fatigue. The Honorable Prime Minister never singled out any one vigil as the contributing cause. The Prime Minister said it's a fact that we had vigils going on around. I mean, I know fully well, I went to a wake at Mbakadere where we had a terrible murder-suicide. It wasn't a vigil, but Mbakadere is a place where over 2,000 people live, and they came out in their respective homes. So there was no vigil, but there was a large wake. And the fact is that anywhere that there is congregation, this goes on. If you look at Dr. Hines' information, and I want to say this most respectfully, Dr. Hines is a very polite man, right? So he will not tell you that he's a Cambridge graduate, expert in epidemiological issues. But he is. And we're very lucky to have him. And if you look at his data graphs, again, I say this very respectfully, it's not very easy to just explain that in the 30 seconds that we get it on the news coverage in the afternoon, where there is an extreme difficulty in having a very capable, member of staff explain what Dr. Hines would normally explain. But when you look at Dr. Hines's data and you look at the map and you look at where these things originated, you will see that it is all of Trinidad and Tobago's contributing factors. Now, stick a pin. This is something that you see everywhere else in the world. It is a combination of gym activity, beaches open, sports, people attending to their civil rights and liberties, travel. So we have seen around the world the domination of cycle behavior, where the virus dips, where the virus rises. We saw it in the post-effect of the election period in September, August and September of 2020. The point is, what's the solution? Coulda, woulda, shoulda. Everybody else in the world has certain management issues. We know that one of the contributing factors as well is people believing that the vaccine was on its way and that we're nearly out of it, and other countries are opening up because we see soccer games, football games, we see stadiums filled with people, and people begin to let our guards down. So, simple point. One, let us make the most of the difficult state of emergency. Two, don't for one moment think that we don't understand and feel and understand the pain. It's not as if you're making a decision and you don't understand the problems. I am an MP in San Fernando West with 25,000 people and deal with the demands and needs of so many vulnerable people in my constituency. Hampers, support systems, services, etc. So those of us who work on the ground, as we say, see it firsthand. But what we're saying, make the most of the state of emergency. Limit the gatherings. Manage to come out of this. Exercise discipline whilst the vaccines begin to roll out in heavier numbers. Be assured that it is the government that is talking, the Prime Minister's head of this cabinet and head of the country, and the current acting head of CARICOM is deep in discussions with every manufacturer, every international agency, all correlations, and the vaccine supply is what we're working on. We have the money to buy the vaccines. We've done the agreements. We've done the payments. We've done the logistics. So we just need to hold on until we get to herd immunity, and that's when the experts tell us what we can do and how we can open up further.
Thank you very much. We have our last question now from Anil Siratan from the Caribbean Lifestyle Communications Network.
Hi, good afternoon. Are you all hear me? Yes, Anil Siratan from the Caribbean Lifestyle Communications Network. I just wanted the Attorney General to state explicitly, are supermarkets and newsrooms, media houses allowed to operate tomorrow and on Thursday during curfew hours? Thank you.
Well, I need you to explicitly ask what you mean by curfew hours. The curfew hours are divided into two parts. The daylight operation of curfew and then the after curfew application. Which end are you asking about?
The daylight curfew.
Between the hours of 5 a.m. and 10 a.m. tomorrow, only the following entities can operate. Number one, religious organizations. Number two, religious organizations that are live streaming. Number three, burials, weddings, religious ceremonies. Those are to be found in Regulation 3. You'll see those things specifically stated in Regulation 14. Number 4, pharmacies are permitted to operate. Number 5, those essential services set out in explicit detail in Regulation 4, subsection 5. So to answer your question, Anil, in exactly the way you've asked for it, i.e. explicitly, Regulation 14 of the regulations published, that is those that are number 2 set out overnight. Regulation 14 says exactly what is permitted, notwithstanding Regulation 310. for the purposes of public holidays on Monday and Thursday during the hours of 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. on those days, each day, only the activities permitted by Regulation 3.5, that's the churches, 3.6, that's the live streaming at the churches, 3.7, that's the burials and the weddings, etc. The people set out in Regulation 4.5. 4.5 is all of the essential services that are allowed during the usually when you're supposed to be home period. And then pharmacies. Only those entities are permitted to be open. If you notice in 4.5, groceries are not permitted to be open in the usual times of 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. So groceries will be closed tomorrow for the public holiday and closed on Thursday for the public holiday. I hope that has been of some clarity and assistance.
Thank you very much. Attorney General, would you like to wrap this afternoon's up?
Yes, members of the media, thank you for always participating and asking the questions. I mean, I know that you're bombarded with questions and you do a phenomenal job in relaying those questions so that people can get the messaging clear. I'd just like to say to you all, thank you for sharing some time on a Sunday. I wish that we could have had an in-person event. We're going to get back there one day. This pandemic will end. I'd like to say to all of the hardworking people in this country that are supporting these circumstances, thank you very, very much. To the people that are suffering and feeling this, it is not lost upon the government and every member of parliament, every councillor in local government, what the situation is. We're asking people to just avoid congregating in any numbers at all so that we can make the most out of this bad situation and get the best out of the curfew provisions that we've provided, get the best out of the state of emergency. I assure you that the Prime Minister is diligent on every minute of the day to make sure we get what we need to get done. And for the public holiday tomorrow, happy Indian Arrival Day to Trinidad and Tobago, as so many of us arrived, or as we like to say, we reach. Secondly, for Corpus Christi, I wish you a holy Corpus Christi to the members of our Christian community that are celebrating that, and I thank you for this opportunity to give some clarification today.
Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon at our media conference, and we remind you to wear your mask, wash your hands, and watch your distance. Have a good day.